Okay, so for my second session of the day, which was 30 minutes after my first, the first session being exploring the future of psychedelic travel, there was a Psychedelics Meet Up, which was right down the hall from my first session, and it was just kind of more of a, it was labeled as a session, as a meetup. It was kind of a networking event, but it was led by these two people. One of them was named Mary Oliver, and she was the head of this 501c3 nonprofit called Center for Shamanic Education, which is just a way, it's just a center to sort of educate about, the use of psychedelics. And another woman named Caitlin Riley, who was the founder and leader of the Psychedelic Society of Texas. And she came along, Caitlin did, with a few other members from different chapters. Like, she was the head of the state, but then she brought along the guy who was the head of the Houston chapter, another woman who was the head of the Austin chapter, and a few other cities. It was interesting, actually. The guy in charge of the Houston chapter was a lawyer for like 30 plus years. And when he retired, he went immediately into running the Houston chapter of the Psychedelic Society of Texas, which I thought was pretty great. I have his card. I can't remember his name, but it's written down. But it was a really interesting event, especially after just the first talk of the day. I really wanted to go somewhere and mingle, because these talks, especially on this topic, at least for me, always leaves me with not only so many questions, but so many things I want to say. So, and this is Jack Yates, Masters of Science of Marketing, graduate student. Sorry to put that in there late. And it was just about sort of bringing your perspective with like-minded individuals from around the world. I mean, there were people there from all over, basically every hemisphere, and just sort of delving into the community. It was very focused on the community in Texas, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I had some to contribute, but not a whole lot. I learned, interestingly enough, that there are a lot of psychedelic churches in Texas, like more than any other state, I think. And the reason for this is it's all falls under this religious freedom thing that's very big in this state. And sort of this, someone else put it this way, as like this Texas ideal of like kind of libertarianism, like don't tell me what to do. But that there's only actually two licensed, my word, their word, recognized churches for giving away actual psychedelics, and most of the churches are just resources. Like the society that Caitlin heads up, the Psychedelic Society of Texas, they don't provide psychedelics to people. They just provide information and knowledge. And they have meetings all over the state where they just sort of talk about the wellness applications of this stuff. And, I met a lot of other interesting people at this event. Before I get into that, what was really great generally about the event is that what it was sort of a reinforcement of like the medical applications, the psychological applications, and the spiritual applications, which I also count as like a very important thing, moving into the mainstream in a state like Texas too, which is, I learned this today. If you get caught with any amount of mushrooms, you go to jail for 5 years. And we were even making jokes that this is a ranching state, and psychedelic mushrooms are known to grow on cow poop. And like there was some joke about like a rancher stepping in the wrong cow patty, getting some dust on his boot from a mushroom, and then going to jail for 5 years. But people are talking about it, and they're having public meetups. I mean, I think this is the first year in South by Southwest history that psychedelics has even been a topic. So this event was really interesting because I have never been in a place like this, in a room of 50 plus people, and that's like a low estimate. There were a lot of people there. We're getting together, not to joke about it, not to make fun of it, not to like revel in some sort of hippie, merry prankster way, but to seriously talk about this as an application. And then like it just sort of proved to me that it's gaining this sort of gradual mainstream acceptance. Do I think it's close to real mainstream acceptance? No. Years away, I honestly do. I mean, the science is out there and it's pretty undeniable. So some of the people I talked to, one was this gentleman named Scott, who and his wife, he's a contractor, like a builder, runs a contracting company out of Akron, Ohio. He's 49. He's not 49. He's older than 49, but the first time he ever took any psychedelic was when he was 49. And he did it because he traveled again, psychedelics and travel, just like the previous session, to Oregon to go to a psychedelic retreat where they put headphones on and they blinded him, and he had like a, I guess their word was therapist, but it's basically a shaman, but they called it like a therapist to walk him through it. And he went there because he needed it. He didn't really want to get into specifics with me about why he did it, but he just alluded it was related to some depression symptoms, and he eventually got his wife to do it, and his younger son, who just turned 21, he's about to take his son to go do it, you know, and that, like, he's literally brought his whole family, immediate family, he only has one child, to go try this because he like believes in it as a medicine. Again, this is a guy who grew up never doing drugs until he was 49 and had like this awakening that he described to me. And like, you know, I don't want to sound gross, but like from a business perspective, it's like another great case of like, there's room here for some sort of industry, you know, if it could ever get widely accepted. I talked to another person whose name was Mary. She was a young woman who was really struggling in her life, was kind of lost, took psychedelics and found Jesus. And she was a Christian, had a cross necklace, and she became very religious and would like loved it and like accepted it and like found her place in the world through it. And that's sort of a mix of, I mean, mostly spirituality, obviously, but also a little bit of psychology in there. And the thing I was mentioning earlier about the Texas psychedelic churches, I learned that from a professor who was on an academic break to go and study psychedelic churches. His name was, I don't remember his name actually, sorry. I wasn't really taking notes because you're mingling, but I wrote down a bunch of notes right after. But he was out in Texas to write a book about psychedelic churches. And he was very serious. He was out of all he said he was from a school in Missouri. And that, you know, it's just more proof that this is not a joke. This is taken seriously. It was a really great event. I was able to give Mary Oliver, who was, I mentioned earlier, the head of the Center for Shamanic Education, my business card, because I do a lot of nonprofit marketing, and said, if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. And she said, thank you, because we definitely need it. While we do have a board, it's really just me running it. I'm speaking as Mary, and I said, look, if you ever need help with scaling your growth, please let me know, because this would be very exciting. Because again, like I'm speaking as someone who views this as a medicine, as a tool, you know, and it's something that we can measure in the brain, and it's proven. And you talk to people like Scott and Mary and others and this professor, and it's just like you get the understanding. You're like, there's real people out there with real issues that have been cured by this, that have tried every other thing in the book and it hasn't worked. And like, it's almost inhumane to deny them this. And that psychedelics as what I would call medical industry is something that needs to be explored further in the mainstream. And this is all information that I sort of really helped get me reinforced through this Psychedelics Meet Up, again, the name of the event, under health and wellness. And, you know, again, just the experience of seeing that many people in a room to seriously discuss this topic was, it sounds strange, I know, but it was kind of surreal to see something like that.